Hello there, welcome to HFY Quantum Pro. Here, helping one another makes the universe smarter. So, what we are waiting for? Let's begin our story.
The distress beacon had been repeating for 11 minutes before Liam Duval decided it was not a trap. Out here in the dead lanes between trade routes, signals like that usually meant one of two things: pirates baiting a hook, or someone actually dying. He ran the signal through his scanner twice and found no weapon signatures hiding nearby. Just a single ship, broken and drifting, leaking atmosphere from three separate hull breaches. Liam changed course. His cargo hauler was small, ugly, and slow when fully loaded, but it had a solid docking clamp and a medical kit he always kept stocked. Old habits from his medic days. He told himself he had left that life behind, but he still packed wound sealant next to his coffee supplies. The wrecked ship was Denari. He recognized the design from trade catalogs. Long, elegant hull, with a silver finish now scorched black from weapons fire. Someone had hit this vessel hard and recently. The scorch marks were still warm on his approach Scandut. He docked carefully, sealed the connection, and pulled on a breathing mask before stepping through. The air inside was thin and tasted like burned metal. Emergency lighting painted everything in dull red that he found the first survivor 30 steps in. A tall Denari male in military armor, slumped against a wall with a blast wound across his left shoulder. He was conscious, barely, and he raised his sidearm the moment he saw Liam. Liam stopped and held up both hands. "I picked up your beacon. I am here to help." The Denari stared at him with narrow golden eyes. "Human," he said, like the word tasted bad. "Yes, former medic. I have supplies. Where are the others?" The soldier, Commander Finn Dorith, did not lower his weapon for a long time, but his arm was shaking, and eventually gravity won. He pointed down the corridor toward a sealed compartment at the back of the ship. Inside, Liam found two more survivors. A Denari woman in medical robes knelt beside a figure on the floor. The woman looked up at him with wide violet eyes full of controlled panic. She was Dr. Olia Sen, and the person bleeding on the floor beneath her hands was someone Liam did not yet know was a princess. All he saw was a young Denari female with silver-blue skin turning gray. A piece of metal shrapnel had gone through her side, and the blood pooling beneath her was thin and pale, almost like water with color mixed in. It was spreading fast. "How long?" Liam asked, dropping to his knees and opening his med kit. "She has been bleeding for over an hour," Olia said. "Our medical systems were destroyed in the attack. I have been applying pressure, but Denari blood does not clot well without technological assistance. She is dying." Liam worked fast. He sealed the wound edges with bioadhesive and applied compression wraps. But the blood loss was already too severe. Her body was shutting down. He could see it in the way her breathing had gone shallow and uneven, in the way her fingers had stopped moving. "She needs blood," Liam said. "We have no stored supply." It was all in the medical bay, which is open to space now. Then a direct transfusion. "From me." Olia stared at him. "That is not possible. Denari biology rejects foreign blood immediately. Cross-species transfusion has never worked with our kind. Our cellular structure is too sensitive. Your blood would kill her faster than the wound." Liam looked at the young woman on the floor. Her chest was barely rising now. He had seen this exact moment too many times during his years as a medic. The moment when the body started letting go. In about 15 minutes, maybe less, there would be nothing left to save. "What if it does not reject it?" he asked. "It will. But what if it does not?" Olia opened her mouth and closed it again. She was a scientist before she was a traditionalist. Theoretically, if the blood was accepted, the human healing factors could stabilize her. Your species carries extraordinary cellular repair mechanisms. But the rejection would come first. It always does. You have a purification filter in your kit. A basic one, yes. Run my blood through it. Strip out everything you can that might trigger a reaction. Give her system the best chance possible. This is insane. She is going to die in the next 10 minutes. I have watched enough people die to know exactly what that looks like. So we can either try something insane, or we can sit here and do nothing. From the doorway, Finn's voice came rough and hard. I will not allow Death World blood inside the princess. Liam did not look away from Olia. Princess. Olia hesitated, then spoke quietly. She is Princess Salith Rien of House Ithra, the last surviving heir of the Denari royal bloodline, and she will be dead before the hour ends if we do not act. The ship groaned around them, metals settling, air hissing through cracks the emergency seals could not hold. Somewhere in the wreckage, a power cell popped and fizzled out. Liam rolled up his sleeve. His arm was covered in old scars from years of field work, small pale lines crossing brown skin. He held it out toward Olia. Set up the line, he said. Finn took a step forward. I said no. Olia looked between the two of them. Then she looked down at Salith, whose lips had turned the color of ash. She reached for the transfusion kit. Finn slammed his fist against the wall, but said nothing more. He stood in the doorway and watched as Olia inserted the needle into Liam's arm, connected the purification filter, and guided the line into Salith's vein. Red human blood, thick and dark and alive, began flowing into the dying princess. Liam sat very still, watching the line, and waited to find out if he had just saved her life or ended it faster. Olia expected the rejection to begin within seconds. She had studied cross-species biology for 20 years, and every piece of research she had ever read said the same thing. Denari's cellular structure was too refined, too sensitive to accept foreign biological material. The princess's immune system should have attacked the human blood the moment it entered her veins. She watched the monitor and counted silently. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Nothing happened. No immune flare. No cellular breakdown. No rejection cascade. Instead, something impossible began unfolding on the screen in front of her. Liam's blood cells were not dying inside Salith's body. They were adapting. Olia watched in real time as the human cells encountered Denari tissue and changed their behavior, shifting their chemical signature just enough to avoid triggering an immune response. It was like watching a language being translated on the fly, one biology learning to speak another. And then the healing started, the aggressive repair factors that human blood carried, the same cellular machinery that let humans survive infections that would kill most species, that let them recover from broken bones and torn muscles and radiation exposure. Those factors went to work inside Salith. Her wound began to clot, not with the fragile, slow clotting that Denari blood produced, but with thick, strong seals that closed the damaged tissue with a speed Olia had never seen in her own species. Salith's vitals steadied. Her heart rate climbed back from the edge. Color returned to her skin, the gray fading back to pale silver blue. Her breathing deepened. "It is working," Olia whispered. She did not believe her own words even as she said them. Liam sat beside the princess with his arm out, the transfusion line running from his vein to hers. He was getting pale himself now. Humans had more blood volume than Denari relative to their size, but there were limits. His body was pulling from reserves it did not really have to spare. "How much more does she need?" he asked. His voice was steady but quieter than before. Olia checked the readings. "Her levels are approaching stability. Another few minutes." Finn stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed, watching everything with an expression caught somewhere between suspicion and something he did not want to name. He had spent his entire military career defending the purity of the royal bloodline. The idea that a human's blood was now running through the princess's body made his skin crawl. But the princess was alive. A minute ago, she had been dying. He said nothing. When Olia finally removed the line, Liam leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. His skin had gone from brown to a dull, washed-out shade. He was dizzy and his hand was shaking, but he did not complain. He just sat there, breathing slowly while his body tried to figure out where all its blood had gone. Olia bandaged his arm and handed him a nutrient pack from her kit. "Eat this. Your body needs to replenish." "How is she?" Liam asked without opening his eyes. "Stable. Unconscious, but stable. You save her life." Liam nodded slightly and bit into the nutrient pack. It tasted like cardboard mixed with salt, but he ate all of it. Over the next hour, Liam pulled himself together enough to help patch the ship. The damage was too severe for full repair, but he managed to seal 2 of the 3 hull breaches and reroute enough power to get basic navigation running. His cargo hauler could tow the wreck at low speed, or they could abandon it entirely and all squeeze into his ship. They chose the second option. They carried Salith carefully onto the cargo hauler. Liam cleared space in the small crew cabin and set up a makeshift bed for her. Finn took the co-pilot's seat without asking. Olia stayed beside the princess, monitoring her vitals. The nearest station was a trade hub called Fell's Reach, about 9 hours away at standard speed. Liam set course and let the autopilot handle the flying. He was too drained to trust his own hands on the controls. While the ship hummed through empty space, Olia sat beside Salith and stared at her medical scanner. The princess was recovering faster than any Denari patient Olia had ever treated. The human blood was still active in her system, still repairing, still adapting. It was not fading or being filtered out. It was integrating that Olia's scientific mind would not let the question go. She opened the scanner's deep analysis mode and began running a full cellular comparison between the human blood and Salith's royal genetics. She was not looking for anything specific. She was just trying to understand how this was possible. The results came back in layers. Compatibility markers, genetic resonance patterns, molecular bonding signatures. Each layer made Olia's eyes wider than the last. Then, almost on instinct, she loaded the one program she never expected to use outside a royal ceremony. The Resonance Binding Protocol, the sacred scan that had guided Denari royal marriages for 3,000 years. The test that identified a true genetic match to the crown. She ran it against the data. The result appeared on screen in a single line of ancient Denari script. Full resonance confirmed. Binding match. Complete. Olia stared at the screen. She read it again. She closed the program, reopened it, and ran the scan a second time. Same result. A third time. Same result. A fourth. Every single time, the answer was the same. This human, this cargo hauler from a death world who carried scars on his arms and cardboard nutrient paste on his breath, was a perfect genetic match to the Ithran royal bloodline. According to 3,000 years of sacred law, Liam Duval was the princess's royal destiny. Olia saved the file. She locked it with her personal encryption, and she sat in the dim light of the cabin, listening to Liam snore softly in the pilot's chair, and tried to figure out how to tell absolutely no one what she had just found. Salith opened her eyes, and the first thing she felt was wrong. Not pain, not weakness, but something deeper. Something inside her had changed. Her blood felt heavier, warmer, moving through her veins with a pulse that did not feel entirely her own. She lay on a narrow bed in a room that smelled like engine grease and recycled air. The ceiling was low, the walls were bare metal, and the hum beneath her was the sound of a cheap cargo engine running at cruise speed. This was not a Denari ship. Olia appeared beside her within seconds. Do not sit up too quickly. Your body is still adjusting. Adjusting to what? Salith asked. Her voice came out rough, like she had been breathing smoke. Olia hesitated just long enough for Salith to notice. You were critically wounded. You lost a dangerous amount of blood. A human found our ship and performed emergency treatment, including a direct blood transfusion from himself to you. Salith's hand moved to her side where the shrapnel had hit. She felt the sealed wound beneath the bandage, tight and solid in a way that Denari healing never produced. Human blood is inside me. Yes, and it saved your life. Salith stared at the ceiling. 3,000 years of unbroken royal bloodline. Generations of careful genetic preservation. And now, human blood, death world blood, was coursing through her body, tangled in her cells, repairing her flesh with a blunt, aggressive force that her own biology had never possessed. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly until the feeling of falling stopped. Finn came in shortly after and briefed her on the situation. The attack on their ship had been ordered by High Regent Morith. He had found them somehow, tracked them through the dead lanes. Their escort was destroyed, their supplies were gone, and they were currently aboard the personal cargo hauler of a human freelancer named Liam Duval. They were headed to a trade station called Fell's Reach. Where is this human? Salith asked. Pilot's chair. Sleeping, last I checked. He gave too much blood and has been recovering. Salith insisted on getting up, despite Olia's protests. She wrapped herself in a blanket and walked slowly through the narrow corridor of the small ship until she reached the cockpit. Liam was sitting in the pilot's chair with his head tilted back, not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. He had a bandage on his arm where the transfusion line had been, and his skin was still a shade paler than it should have been. When he heard her footsteps, he opened his eyes and turned. "Hey," he said, "you should probably still be lying down." Salith studied him. He was average height for a human, solidly built with the kind of frame that came from physical work rather than military training. His face was unremarkable, pleasant but not striking, with tired eyes and a few days of stubble. He looked at her with simple, direct concern. "Nothing more. You gave me your blood," she said. "Yeah, you were in bad shape. It was the only option. You did not know who I was. I knew you were dying. That was enough." Salith did not know what to do with that answer. In the Denari court, every action had a purpose behind it. Every kindness was a transaction. Every gift was a debt. The idea that someone would open a vein for a complete stranger simply because they were dying was so far outside her experience that she could not find a place to put it. "Thank you," she said finally. Liam shrugged. "Glad it worked. Honestly, I was not sure it would." He offered her the co-pilot chair, and she sat down carefully. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars drift past the cockpit window. Liam did not push conversation. He did not ask her about the attack or her identity or what had brought her to the dead lanes in a damaged ship. He just let the quiet exist. Salith found that strange. And strangely comfortable. In the cabin behind them, a very different conversation was happening. Olia had pulled Finn into the cargo hold and sealed the door. She showed him her scanner, the resonance binding results still locked behind her encryption. She typed in the code and let him read. Finn read the screen once. Then he took a step back, as if the device had burned him. "No," he said flatly. "The scan is damaged. The equipment went through an attack. The calibration is off. I ran it 4 separate times, Finn. The equipment is fine. The result is consistent. Then the protocol itself is flawed. This has never happened before. Not once in 3,000 years. Which is exactly why we cannot ignore it. The resonance binding is sacred law. A confirmed match must be reported to the crown. There is no crown," Finn snapped. "Morith sits on the throne. Salith is in hiding. And you want to announce that her royal genetic match is a human cargo pilot who smells like engine fuel." Olia did not flinch. "I want to follow the law that both of us swore to uphold. A full resonance match has the power to legitimize Salith's claim. It could rally every loyalist faction in the Empire. This could change everything, or it could destroy everything. Half the loyalists would reject a human match on principle. It would split our support in half. Perhaps, but hiding it is a violation of sacred law. And if it comes out later that we knew and said nothing, it will be worse." They stared at each other in the dim cargo hold. Neither was willing to give ground. Finally, they agreed on one thing. They would keep it quiet until they reached safety. Then they would decide. But when they returned to the main cabin, Salith was sitting upright in the co-pilot chair, watching them both with eyes that missed nothing. "You are hiding something," she said. "Both of you. I can see it." Olia looked at Finn. Finn looked at the floor. "Tell me," Salith said quietly. "Whatever it is, tell me now." Olia told her everything. She held the scanner up so Salith could read the results herself, and she did not soften the words or dress them in careful diplomatic language. She said it plainly. The resonance binding, the most sacred genetic test in Denari civilization, had confirmed a full match between the royal bloodline of House Ithra and the biology of a human cargo hauler named Liam Duval. That be why every law that Denari had honored for 3,000 years. This man was her royal destiny. Salith read the screen 3 times. Her face showed nothing. That was the training of a princess who had grown up in a court full of predators. She had learned early that showing emotion was the same as showing weakness, and weakness got people killed. But inside, everything she had ever been taught about her bloodline, her duty, and her future was cracking apart. "Where is he?" she asked. "Still in the cockpit." Olia said, Salith handed the scanner back and walked forward. Finn moved to follow her, but Olia caught his arm and shook her head. Some conversations needed to happen without an audience. Liam was exactly where she had left him, sitting in the pilot's chair watching their course on the navigation display. He looked up when she entered and gave her a small nod. "Feeling better? I need to tell you something," Salith said. She sat down in the co-pilot chair and folded her hands in her lap. "My physician ran a scan on your blood after the transfusion. A deep-level genetic scan that my people use for a very specific purpose." Liam waited. He did not interrupt or guess or try to fill the silence. He just listened. The scan is called the resonance binding. It has been used by the Denari royal houses for 3,000 years to identify genetic matches to the crown. A true match is considered sacred. It determines who is recognized as a consort, a protector, a partner to the royal bloodline. Liam's expression shifted slightly. Not alarm, but careful attention. "Okay, the scan found a full match between your biology and my bloodline. A complete resonance. According to 3,000 years of law and tradition, you are what my people call a royal destiny." Silence filled the cockpit. The engine hummed. Stars drifted past. Liam looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked a question that Salith did not expect. "What do you want to do about it?" She blinked. "What?" "I'm asking what you want. Not what the scan says, not what the law requires. What do you personally want to do about this?" Salith opened her mouth and found that she had no answer. In her entire life, no one had ever asked her that question. Every decision had been made by duty, by tradition, by political necessity. What she wanted had never been part of the equation. "I do not know," she admitted. Liam nodded. "That is fair. You have had about 2 minutes to process it. Take your time." Before either of them could say more, the ship's proximity alarm screamed to life. Liam spun to the navigation display, and his face went tight. A priority alert was broadcasting from Fell's Reach Station. A Denari warship had been detected entering the sector, running a search pattern. Moritz forces. Finn was in the cockpit within seconds. He read the alert and swore in Denari. "He tracked us. He must have placed a signal tag on the wreckage before the attack. Can we outrun them?" Salith asked. Liam shook his head. "This ship is built for hauling, not running. If that warship locks onto us, we are done." Finn's hand went to his sidearm instinctively, but they all knew that a pistol would do nothing against a Hunter-class interceptor. Liam stared at the navigation chart for a long moment. Then he pulled up a different overlay, one showing political boundaries. A thin line of green cut across the chart about 6 hours ahead of them. Human-controlled space. "There," Liam said, pointing. "If we cross that border, Morith's ship cannot follow. Attacking a vessel in human territory would be a diplomatic incident. Even a usurper cannot afford that kind of attention." Finn frowned. "Can we reach it in time? If I push the engines past their safety limits and drop all non-essential power, maybe. It will be close." Salith looked at the chart, at the thin green line that separated Denari space from human territory. Her entire life, she had been told that humans were primitive, deathworlders, dangerous and unpredictable. And now a human's blood was keeping her alive, a human ship was carrying her to safety, and the only hope she had left was a human border. "Do it," she said. Liam, kill the lights. He shut down heating, dropped the cargo bay pressure to minimum, and rerouted every spare watt of power into the engines. The ship groaned and shuddered as it accelerated past its design limits. The temperature inside dropped fast enough that their breath became visible. Salith pulled her blanket tighter. Finn sat rigid in his seat with his jaw clenched. Olia held her scanner against her chest like a shield. Liam flew. His hands were steady on the controls despite the cold, despite the fatigue, despite the fact that his body was still running on less blood than it should have had. He watched the navigation display with the calm focus of someone who had been in bad situations before and had learned that panic did not help. Behind them, at the edge of the scanner's range, a single bright dot appeared. Morith's warship. It had found their trail that IT was faster than them. It was closing the gap. Liam checked the distance to the border. 5 hours. He checked the warship's approach speed. 4.5 hours to intercept. The math was not good He pushed the engines harder and felt the hull vibrate in a way that meant something important was about to break. "Hold on," he said quietly. "This is going to be tight." The warship caught them 30 minutes before the border. Liam had pushed his engines until one of the secondary thrusters cracked and vented coolant into the vacuum behind them. He coaxed the ship forward on what was left, but the math had never been in their favor. A Hunter-class interceptor built for pursuit against a cargo hauler built for carrying freight. It was not a race. It was a countdown. The interceptor slid into weapons range, and the cockpit display lit up with a targeting lock. A moment later, the communication channel crackled open. The face that appeared on screen was sharp and cold. High Regent Morith looked exactly the way power looked when it had been taken instead of earned. His eyes were flat, and his voice carried the kind of authority that came from knowing no one around him dared to disagree. "Princess Salith," he said, "this pursuit has gone on long enough. Surrender yourself, and I will let your companions leave. Continue running, and I will disable your vessel. Either way, this ends now." Salith stood behind Liam's chair, her hands gripping the headrest. She was still weak. She was still cold. Human blood was still moving through her veins, keeping her alive with a stubborn, foreign strength that did not care about politics or royal protocol. "I will not surrender to you," she said. "You are not the rightful ruler of our people. You stole that throne." Morith's expression did not change. Legitimacy is decided by those who hold power, not those who hide in cargo ships. He glanced at Liam with barely concealed contempt. "Traveling with a human. Your family's decline is even worse than I imagined." He cut the channel. Seconds later, the interceptor fired. Not a killing shot. A precise, surgical strike aimed at disabling their engines. The blast hit the port side and the ship lurched violently. Alarm screamed. Liam fought the controls as the vessel spun. "Port thruster is gone," he said, his voice flat with focus. "We have main engine only. Speed is dropping." They were dead in the water. The border was close enough to see on the display, but far enough that they would never reach it. Morith's ship moved closer, positioning for a boarding approach. Liam looked at the communication panel. Then he did something none of them expected. He opened a broadband channel. Not aimed at Morith, not aimed at the interceptor, but broadcast wide on every frequency the human ships in the region would be monitoring. Standard emergency band. "Open call. This is Liam Duval, registration Bravo 774, cargo hauler class. I am at coordinates 297 by 041, near the Fells Reach border corridor. I have wounded civilians aboard, and I am under attack by a foreign military vessel. Any human ships in range, I am requesting assistance. Repeat, requesting assistance." He sent it and sat back. Finn stared at him. "What are you doing? There is no human fleet here. No military base. You are calling for help from no one." "I'm calling for help from everyone," Liam said. The minutes passed like hours. Morith's interceptor closed to boarding distance. A docking arm began extending toward their hull. Salith could see the soldiers through the interceptor's observation ports, armored and ready. Then the communication panel blinked. "Duval, this is the mining frigate Cold Hand. I am reading your position. Changing course now. 20 minutes out." Another blink. "Cargo hauler Bravo 774. This is patrol cutter Ridgeline. Confirm you are under attack? We are diverting." Another. "Liam, this is Big Nell off the heavy freighter Sundown. We heard your call. We are coming." "Han Tai." One by one, they answered. Mining ships, patrol boats, freight haulers, even a fuel tanker that had no weapons at all, but came anyway. Human ships from across the sector, none of them military, none of them organized, none of them ordered to respond. They just heard one of their own calling for help, and they turned their ships around. Morith's captain reported the incoming contacts. One vessel, then 3, then 7, then 12. Human ships converging from every direction. None of them were warships. Most of them could not have won a fight against the interceptor. But there were a lot of them, and they were coming fast, and the political calculation had just changed completely. Attacking a single cargo hauler in disputed space was quiet. Engaging a dozen human civilian vessels at the border was an incident. An incident that would bring attention, investigations, and consequences that even a usurper could not control. Morith appeared on screen one last time. His composure had cracked just enough to show the fury underneath. "This is not finished," he said to Salith. Then he ordered his ship to withdraw. The interceptor pulled back, retracted its docking arm, and turned away. Within minutes, it was accelerating out of the sector. The first human ship to arrive was the Cold Hand, a battered mining frigate with more dents than paint. Its captain, a woman with gray hair and oil-stained coveralls, hailed Liam directly. "You all right, Duval?" "I am now. Thank you. You would have done the same. Need a tow?" They towed Liam's crippled ship across the border and into the safety of a small human trading station. The other ships arrived over the next hour, forming a loose, protective cluster around the station. Nobody asked for payment. Nobody asked who the Denari passengers were or why a warship had been chasing them. They just made sure everyone was fed, the ship was patched, and the fuel tanks were full. Salith stood on the station's observation platform and watched the human ships floating outside the window. Miners, haulers, fuel carriers. Ordinary people in ordinary vessels who had dropped everything to answer a stranger's call. And no orders. No obligation. No reward. They just came. She stood there for a long time, looking out at those battered ships, and something deep inside her understanding of the galaxy quietly rearranged itself. Salith made the call from a borrowed communication room in the human trading station. The walls were thin, the equipment was old, and the chair wobbled when she sat down. It was the least royal setting imaginable for what she was about to do. She contacted every loyalist faction she still had channels to, military officers who had refused to serve Morith, noble houses that had gone silent rather than bend the knee, civilian leaders who had been quietly organizing resistance in the outer colonies. She reached them all, one by one, and she told them the truth. She transmitted the resonance binding scan. Unedited, unfiltered, a full royal match, confirmed 4 times by Dr. Olius Sen, between the bloodline of House Ithra and a human named Liam Duval. The reaction was exactly what Finn had predicted. It split like a cracked stone. Half the loyalists called it a miracle. The resonance binding had spoken. 3,000 years of sacred tradition could not be questioned. If the scan said this human was the match, then it was true, and it meant the old traditions were reaching beyond their species to find what was needed. The other half called it an abomination. A human, a death worlder, a man who hauled cargo for a living and had never set foot on Denari soil. The bloodline would be polluted. The tradition would be destroyed. Some of them said they would rather let Morith keep the throne than accept a human in the royal house. Salith let them argue. She let the messages fly back and forth for hours, the outrage and the hope crashing against each other like waves. Then she recorded her own message and sent it to all of them at once. She did not sit in a wobbly chair for the recording. She stood. She wore the same borrowed blanket she had been wrapped in since waking up on Liam's ship, and she did not apologize for it. She told them what happened. The attack, the shrapnel, the bleeding. The human stranger who found their broken ship in the dead lanes and boarded it without knowing who was inside. She told them about the transfusion, about Liam opening his own vein for a dying alien he had never met, about how his blood did something no Denari science could explain and kept her alive. She told them the scan confirmed what his actions had already proven, that he was someone who would protect the crown, not because of power or politics or personal gain, but because a person was dying in front of him and he could not walk away from that. She said the Denari had spent centuries looking inward for strength, guarding their bloodline like a treasure locked in a vault. Perhaps it was time to open the door. The message spread fast. It went beyond the loyalist factions and into the general population. The story of the human who gave his blood to save a princess he did not know moved through Denari space like a quiet fire. And everywhere it went, it changed the way people thought about the species they had always dismissed as primitive deathworlders. While the galaxy argued about his destiny, Liam was sitting alone in a storage room at the back of the station, rewiring a broken power coupling from his ship. Finn found him there. The commander stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Liam work with steady hands and no hurry. Then he stepped inside and leaned against the wall. "What are you planning to do?" Finn asked. Liam did not look up. "About what?" "About everything. The scan. The princess. The throne. I'm a cargo hauler, Finn, and a retired medic. I am not royalty." Finn was quiet for a while. Then he spoke in a voice that was softer than Liam had ever heard from him. "When I was young, I was a soldier on the northern border. There was a skirmish. I got hit and went down behind enemy lines. I lay there bleeding for hours, certain I was going to die. Then a human walked out of the tree line, a combat medic from a nearby outpost. He crossed through active fighting to reach me. He did not know I was Denari military. He did not know which side I was on. He saw someone bleeding, and he came to help." Finn paused. "I spent 20 years trying to understand why he did that. Watching you, I think I finally do. It is not complicated. You help because that is what you are." Liam looked up at him for the first time. "You do not have to be a king," Finn said. "You do not have to be a symbol or a politician. You just have to be what you already are. Someone who shows up when it matters." He left without waiting for a response. The Loyalist ships began arriving that evening. Small at first, a few frigates and scout vessels slipping into the human sector under cover of trade routes. Then larger ones, a cruiser, 2 destroyers, an old battleship that had been hiding in a nebula for months. They came because a princess asked them to, but they stayed because of the story. The human who bled for a stranger. The scam that confirmed what no one believed possible. Salith found Liam on the observation deck, watching the Loyalist ships gather outside the station. She stood beside him and said nothing for a long time. "I'm not asking you to be a king," she finally said. "I'm not asking you to be a consort or a figurehead. I am asking you to stay. Not because of Scan, because you're the first person who ever asked me what I wanted." Liam looked at her. "What do you want now?" Salith smiled. It was small and quiet, but was the first real smile she had allowed herself since the night of the coup. "I want to take back my throne," she said, "and I want you beside me when I do." Liam watched the ships outside the window. Dozens of them now, gathering around a tiny human station at the edge of nowhere, drawn together by blood and a story that refused to stay quiet. He nodded slowly. "I will need to cancel a few deliveries." Salith laughed. It was a short, surprised sound like she had forgotten she knew how. Outside, the Loyalist fleet grew. And somewhere in the distance, across the vast dark of Denari space, a usurper sat on a stolen throne and felt, for the first time, the ground shift beneath him.